Mom, viruses. Be careful, the garage is a warm room. It was a storage area for toys and my unwanted things. They carried plates over the threshold, left food on a stool, and went off to the Christmas tree. I hugged an old blanket and realized the most dangerous infection is their comfort. If you're ready for this journey, make sure you hit that subscribe button and give this a like so you don't miss the updates. And let me know in the comments what city you're watching from. It's always lovely to see where everyone is. I'm 66, widowed, and the kind of woman who keeps extra birthday cards in a shoebox because you never know who'll need a lift. My late husband, Frank, used to tease that I ran our home like a tiny hospital. Everything labeled, pillbox topped up, emergency numbers taped to the fridge. I worked 35 years in an internal medicine office, starting as the girl who kept the file room from collapsing and retiring as the one who made the doctors behave when Medicare updated its rules. So yes, I know my way around a chart, a bill, and a boundary. I also know when something smells wrong, and being exiled to my son's garage on Christmas because viruses was not about health. It was about control dressed up in hand sanitizer. Let me set the scene. After Frank died, my son, Ethan, and his wife, Nicole, asked me to move in for a few months. They had the baby, Clara, and daycare wait lists were longer than the line at the DMV. They'd build a granny suite, Ethan said, tapping the blueprint app on his phone like he knew the first thing about a load-bearing wall. I'd cover some utilities from the proceeds of selling my bungalow, and in return, I'd have family. Pancake Saturdays, lullabies, a soft landing. It sounded like grace. I packed my Pyrex and framed pictures and handed the realtor my keys, telling myself it was a new chapter. "We'll make room for you," Nicole promised, hugging me with those light, quick pats people use when they've already turned toward the door. At first, it was fine, better than fine. I baked cinnamon rolls while Clara gummed her teething ring and watched Hallmark with me, both of us oohing at the snowfall that was definitely powered by a snow machine. I folded tiny onesies, taught Nicole how to stretch a roast into 3 meals without anyone noticing, and tried not to wince when Ethan left his socks like breadcrumbs through the house. "He's my boy, a good boy. You taught him to be kind," Frank used to say. "You can't unteach that." Then autumn came, and with it, the drift. The granny suite stalled when a contractor ghosted us, then when lumber prices spiked, then my personal favorite, when the HOA decided the window placement was a visual encroachment. I stopped hearing "a few months" and started hearing "someday." The guest room became a staging area for Nicole's online boutique, which somehow needed my dresser. A whiteboard appeared on the fridge labeled "Germs and Grandma," where Nicole wrote notes like, "Do not share hand towel" and "masks in basket. Use always." Even when alone, I know anxiety when I see it. And I also know when anxiety is a leash. By Thanksgiving, Nicole started disinfecting after me. I'd leave the kitchen and she'd sweep through with sprays that smelled like fake lemon and fear. Ethan, sweet pea that he is, said we were all just trying our best. He suggested I move my things to the garage, temporarily, just to give Nicole's inventory space to blossom for Q4. Blossoming took place where the Christmas decorations should have gone. Boxes of leggings and scented candles turned the guest room into a shipping center. My old blanket and the rocking chair Frank had refurnished ended up parked by the bikes and the bin of shorted-out Christmas lights. Look, every family juggles seasons, and I'm not fragile. But the night they carried my Christmas dinner through the garage door like they were feeding a zoo exhibit, that was not juggling. That was a decision. It started with a cough. One dry little bark when I laughed too hard at a joke on a rerun of The Golden Girls. Nicole's head snapped up. "Mom, are you feeling okay?" she asked like a school nurse about to call a parent. I said I was fine. She measured my forehead with the back of her hand, then brought out the oximeter like a deputy flashing her badge. My numbers were perfect, which made her frown. "She think it's best if you keep a little distance until we know," she said, voice soft as a tissue. And that's how, on Christmas Eve, I ended up tucked beside the garage freezer with a space heater humming and a plate of food balanced on a stool. The door to the kitchen stayed shut, the baby laughed by the tree, music floated under the door like something from another life. Nicole had propped my phone up with a little ring light so you can FaceTime the game, she chirped, as though a glowing rectangle could substitute for dimpled hands reaching for me and the smell of pine sap on the baby's pajamas. She called it layered protection. I called it what it was: unnecessary, cruel, and dressed in wellness lingo to look like love. I ate my green beans and thought about infections, how they spread in silence until the fever breaks. Comfort is like that if you let it replace compassion. On Christmas morning, I took the plate they slid into my sweet, smiled through glass, and made a decision that would change everything. I would not spend another holiday behind a door someone else held closed. The next week, while Nicole disinfected a surface that had never done her a lick of harm, I went for a drive. She'd hidden my car keys for safety, but I've raised teenagers, there's always a spare. I told Ethan I needed fresh air and promised to mask. He looked relieved, like the whole house had exhaled. I drove to a little coffee shop with a parking lot full of minivans and retired couples sharing scones. I ordered black coffee, sat by the window, and opened my laptop. 35 years in healthcare give you two gifts: patience and paperwork. I logged into my MyTart and my Medicare portal. I wanted to check my labs from my annual physical. Perfect cholesterol, thank you. But as I clicked through, something pulled at my sleeve. Messages I didn't write. Appointment reminders I never saw. A note to my doctor from my account asking whether Mom should keep driving given her increasing confusion. Mom, as in me, sent from my account at 2 a.m. 3 weeks earlier. The reply, cautious and kind, suggested a cognitive screening to ensure safety, which Nicole had followed by scheduling on my behalf. I scrolled and felt the gentle ice of fury, clean, clear, and strangely calming. I am not confused. I can recite my grandkids' birthdays backwards while making pot roast. I can run the alphabet of antibiotics and which ones you take with food. I could also hear Frank saying, in that low voice he used when we found a leak under the sink, "Honey, this could get worse if we don't catch it now." I clicked over to my pharmacy profile. 2 prescriptions had been picked up by caregiver on days I was home. I blew on my coffee, the steam fogging my glasses like a little cloud that gave me the cover to breathe one long breath. Then I called the pharmacy tech, told her I wanted a note on my account. No caregiver pickups without my verbal confirmation. She put it on there, bless her. Common sense stapled to a file. Next, I called Dr. Wagner's office. My old office, actually. The receptionist, young enough to be my granddaughter, put me on hold, and I could practically smell the Lysol and coffee from 2 rooms away. When she came back, I said, "This is Marion. You still have me marked as Marion Ellison Wells, yes?" And she said yes, and I said, "Please remove any proxy access from my record, immediately." She hesitated, not wanting to get in the middle of family thing. I spared her the detail. I said, "Someone sent messages from my account that were not me." Silence. Then the click of keys. She said, "Done. The portal shows only you now." I thanked her and tried to keep the quiver out of my voice. By the time my coffee went cold, I'd made a list. Insurance fraud hotline for my supplement plan, my banker, and a lawyer. Not because I wanted to scorch the earth, because I had the distinct feeling someone was walking with muddy boots across my good rug and calling it an accident. I started small. I called the insurance to ask about explanation of benefits. 2 claims pinged my chart that I didn't recognize. A caregiver consultation billed by a telehealth service I'd never used, and a home environment safety assessment. Cute. These were not big charges, but they were a wedge. I asked the rep to flag my account for potential fraud and mail me a detailed list of recent claims. She read me the address they had on file. It was Nicole's work address. I said, "That's incorrect." Feeling my lip curl. "Please restore my mailing address to mine." She did. Paper trail, back where it belonged. When I got home, I found my room, the garage, smelling faintly of eucalyptus. Nicole stood in the doorway with a basket of laundry, cheeks pink with organization. "How was your drive?" she asked, sing-song. "Did you wear your mask?" I smiled. I picked up coffee. I kept to myself. It was true, and also not the point. That night, Ethan came out to the garage with a folding chair and sat like a man about to plead his case. "Mom," he said, "you know Nicole worries." I touched his knee. "I know, but worry can't become a weapon." He flinched at that, and I saw my boy, 8 years old with a skinned knee, wanting to make everything right. "We're trying," he muttered. "We're doing our best." "I am too," I said quietly, "but I'm not a package to be left at a door."
2 mornings later, my cough, remember the one used to justify exile, returned with a little rattle. I went to urgent care, alone, because independence is a muscle you keep in shape. The PA listened, ordered a chest x-ray, and picked up a faint pneumonia. "Let's start antibiotics," she said. "And are you safe at home?" The question floated in the room. She meant domestic violence, but the answer hung there like fog. "I am," I said, and felt the lie itch. Safe? Not like I wanted to be, not like I deserved. Back home, Nicole was in the kitchen, mask looped under her chin like a fashion accessory. "You should have told me," she scolded. "We could have done a telehealth." I placed the discharge papers on the counter. "I'm fine," I said. "I'll keep to my room." Her eyes flicked to the papers, then to me. "We'll bring meals out." "Of course you will," I thought. "Of course you will." That night, warmth from the space heater made the garage air breathe like a sleeping animal. I watched the shadows move and thought of my mother, who raised 3 girls with a sewing machine and a spine of steel. "There's the thing people say about you," she told me once. "And then there's the truth you carry alone." Nicole would say she was protecting her family. The truth I carried was that she was minimizing me until I could fit in a checklist. I waited until Ethan left for work, and Nicole took Clara to baby music class. I went inside, printed every portal message, every EOB, every reminder sheet scheduled for me. I tucked them into a manila envelope that used to hold Clara's birth announcements. Then I drove to a little legal office above the bakery on Main. The door had a bell that sounded like a teacup. I told the receptionist my name, slid the envelope across the desk, and said 6 words I never thought I'd say. "I need an elder law attorney." Her eyebrows lifted. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but I've got time and a fresh pen." She laughed and penciled me in for that afternoon, bless her busy heart. The lawyer, soft-voiced, attentive, with a streak of gray that made me trust him, read my file like it was a thriller. When he got to the message about my confusion, he tapped the desk once with his pencil. "This is a classic setup," he said gently. "It starts with access. Proxy to medical records, access to prescription pickups, small changes to mailing addresses, then bigger things, banking, titles, decisions." He didn't say the word abuse, but it sat between us anyway. "What do you recommend?" I asked. "We're not going to war," he said. "We're going to build a fence. Durable power of attorney revoked and reassigned. Healthcare proxy revoked and reassigned. Bank accounts refortified. And a letter to their household
clarifying boundaries and consequences. He paused. Do you have someone you trust to be your proxy? I did. My sister Ruthie in Ohio, sturdy as a church pew. We spent 2 hours drawing lines. He drafted a new healthcare power of attorney, naming Ruthie, with clear language, no restrictions on movement or visitation, unless ordered by a physician who has examined me. He added that any requests for caregiver pickups or messages to providers must be accompanied by my verbal confirmation. He prepared a revocation notice for any prior authorization, and somewhere in Nicole's inbox, a door quietly unlatched. He asked about my finances. I told him what I'd contributed from selling the bungalow. He frowned. Was there a written agreement about the granny suite? There wasn't. Because family, because trust, because hope. Then we make one now, and we send it certified. If they refuse, we adjust. Adjust is a polite lawyer word for consequences. I left his office lighter by 5 pages and heavier by what they meant. I stopped at the post office, sent the letter certified, and treated myself to a slice of marble rye to eat in the car, crumbs catching in my scarf. On the drive home, Take It to the Limit came on, and I laughed because the universe is sometimes too on the nose. The letter arrived 2 days later. I know because Nicole called me while I was in the backyard clipping dead herbs. What is this? She demanded, the paper rattling like a snake. Boundaries and legal clarity. She scoffed. You're making a big deal out of nothing. Nicole, you put me in the garage for Christmas. Silence. Then, we were protecting Clara. You were punishing me because I wouldn't be managed, I said. Calm as a lake at dawn. Those are not the same thing.
Ethan came home early, jaw tight. He held the letter like it might bite. Mom, he started. I put down my shears. I love you, Ethan. I am not doing this to hurt you. I'm doing this so I don't disappear. He swallowed. Nicole thinks I know what Nicole thinks, I said gently. This is what I think. Starting now, no one talks to my doctor but me or Ruthie. No one picks up my medications but me or Ruthie. No one uses my name to open accounts, schedule appointments, or make decisions. If I'm sick, we follow the physician's orders, not Facebook. He looks like he wanted to argue. He looked like he wanted to be 8 again. He looked like my boy. Okay, he said at last. Okay. For 2 weeks, the house moved like a chessboard. Nicole bristled every time I entered the kitchen without narrating my hand washing. Ethan overcompensated by inviting me to weigh in on absurdities like whether the air purifier should live by the couch or the plant. I kept my head down, kept my records straight, and kept a log. You learn to document when you've worked in medicine, not to weaponize, to remember. Then the bank called. Miss Ellison Wells, we see a new automatic transfer set up from your checking to a joint household account. The amount was small, but the principal, as my mother would say, was not. Cancel it, I said, and please note that no new transfer is to be established without my in-branch, in-person approval. I drove to the bank, shook hands with a manager who wore a tie covered in little sailboats, and signed the instructions in blue ink while he watched. Fences. Everywhere, fences. That night, Nicole stood in the entryway like a news anchor about to deliver a harsh story. I feel attacked, she said. This is not the family I wanted. I could have listed all the families I didn't get to have, the one where my husband lived, the one where my knees didn't ache in the rain, but I chose a different path. I don't want to fight, I said. I want respect. She blinked and said nothing, and I realized she didn't know what that looked like when it wasn't compliance. We scraped along like that until March. Then the universe moved a piece I hadn't expected. Nicole posted a long Facebook thread in the neighborhood group about cohabiting with high-risk elders and how to enforce boundaries when they don't understand modern health. There were no names, but anyone who knew us would. She ended it with a flourish about legal overreactions and how sad it is when older folks stop trusting family. I learned about it when my friend Lila from church texted a screenshot with 3 words. "You okay, honey?" I read every comment, the sympathetic ones and the ones that made my hands shake. People love to give advice about families they don't live in. Then I did something I rarely do. I commented. I used my own account, my own name, my own voice. "Hi, neighbors. This is Marion. I love my family. I also love my health and my dignity. I have a wonderful doctor and a sister who is my healthcare proxy. I did not agree to be isolated, and I am not confused. If anyone needs resources on balancing safety with respect, the county has a great elder services hotline." I added the number and hit send. No mud, no fire, just the fence again. This time, public. The next morning, I woke to a message from a county social worker asking if I'd like information about caregiver mediation. I said yes. When she called, her voice was the human equivalent of a warm shawl. She explained a process, voluntary, conversational, built to help families recalibrate. I watched the steam from my tea curl and thought about Grace. I said, "Set it up." When I told Ethan, he rubbed his temples. "Nicole won't like it," he said. "She says it makes us look bad." "It makes us look like adults," I said. He didn't argue, but he didn't agree either. 2 days later, the mediator sat us at the dining table with a bowl of mince between us like a little ship keeping peace. She asked each of us to describe our needs. Nicole went first, her voice tight, safety, order, predictability. I went next, autonomy, inclusion, truth. Ethan asked for harmony, which is another word for please let me not be in the middle. The mediator laid out simple agreements: door open policies, shared calendar, no more posts about each other on social media, and if someone is sick, we follow the physician's orders and communicate clearly. Heads nodded, pens scratched. For one fragile hour, it felt like a bridge. It lasted 2 weeks. Then Clara got a cold, as toddlers do. Nicole swabbed her nose like a lab tech and posted a picture of the negative test to prove she whooped it. I made soup. I carried a bowl into the kitchen, and Nicole stepped back like I'd brought in a live bat. "I asked you not to come close when she's sick," she snapped. I reminded her of the plan we'd agreed to. She slammed a drawer. "Plans change," she said. "We need to be flexible." Flexible, in this context, meant obedient. That night, I lay awake listening to the house breathe and made another decision. The next day, I called the senior co-op across town. They had a wait list longer than a CVS receipt, but when the director learned I'd managed medical offices and could wrangle a newsletter, she said, "Let me see what I can do." 2 weeks later, someone moved to be near their daughter, and a 1-bedroom opened like a hand. I signed the lease with a pen that had flowers on it, because you take your pretty where you can get it. I didn't tell Ethan and Nicole, not yet. I knew how that ambush would look. Poor, confused Marion doing another legal overreaction. Instead, I packed slowly, box by box, labeled as always. I lined up movers who didn't grunt when they lifted. I scheduled my change of address with the post office. I ordered a new kettle shaped like a robin. And then I waited for the right moment to make my move count. Because here's the part Ethan didn't know. When I sold the bungalow, I didn't put all my eggs in one basket. Frank and I had a little fund, nothing flashy, the kind of savings you squirrel away with coupons and carefulness. When I moved in with Ethan and Nicole, I contributed to groceries and the light bill and a little to the granny suite. But I kept the nest egg intact. Not because I didn't trust them, but because I trusted myself to plan for the storm you don't see coming. And just when he thought he had me backed into a corner, he forgot who he was dealing with. Stick with me, because you'll want to see how this plays out. The Friday before my move, I asked Ethan to meet me for breakfast at the diner with the sticky menus and the best waffles this side of Ohio. He came alone, shoulders rounded. We ordered coffee. "I found a place," I said. He blinked. "What place?" "A co-op," I said. "It's sunny, it's safe, and they have bingo that turns into a black market for Werther's originals." He laughed despite himself, and then sobered. "Nicole's going to be upset." I reached for his hand. "Ethan, I love you. Living with you has made me smaller. That's not all of us. I'm choosing something that makes me me." "Are you leaving us?" he asked, freeing his hand to pick at the napkin. "No," I said. "I'm leaving your garage." I slid an envelope across the table, the second manila one of the saga. Inside, a letter from my lawyer terminating any implied financial obligation toward the granny suite, a reminder that no structure had been built, and an offer. "I'm transferring a fund to Clara in a trust. It will help with college or whatever she chooses after high school. You and Nicole will manage it together, but the trustee will be Ruthie, and distributions will have conditions." He looked up, startled. "Conditions?" I said. "That you both complete a caregiver education course on elder respect offered by the county, and that you attend 2 sessions with the mediator. You don't have to agree with me, you just have to show up." His eyes shone. "Mom, this is not a punishment. It's a boundary and a blessing. Learn how to treat me, and you'll get better at treating everyone." He took the envelope like it weighed a pound of hope. "Will you tell Nicole?" he asked. "I'll tell her with you, tonight. But I want to say the truth plain. I will not be isolated again. If I cough, I'll call my doctor. If I'm tired, I'll rest. If I cook, I'll eat at the table. If that's impossible under your roof, then I'll go where it is possible, and I'll love you from there." We sat with our coffee cooling, the steam rising and fading like little forecasts of our future. He nodded once, we paid the bill, we went home to face the music. Nicole did not take it well. She accused me of abandoning family. She accused me of bribing us to do what you want. She said I was broadcasting our private business to strangers. I kept my voice even. I have kept our business private. I could have called Adult Protective Services after the Christmas in the garage, and I didn't. I chose conversation. I chose mediation. I chose love with a spine. She scoffed. "You're dramatic." I'm 66. I don't have time to be anything but clear. I moved 2 days later. The movers carried my rocking chair like a crown. I stood in my new little living room, sunlight splashing the walls, and felt a soft hum in my chest that I hadn't felt in months. My own kettle sang on my own stove, and I sat in my own chair and cried exactly 3 tears. Then I made a list for the bulletin board and put on lipstick, because there was a welcome bingo at 2, and I am not the kind of woman who shows up dull. Over the next weeks, I built a life that fit like my favorite cardigan. I made friends with Mallory on the 2nd floor, who told a dirty joke so quietly you weren't entirely sure she'd told it at all. I started a newsletter called The Robin's Nest because the director liked the name. I taught a Know Your Portal class and helped 3 women remove their ex-husbands from their health proxies. I hung a photo of Frank above the kettle so he could watch me not burn the soup. I took Clara on Tuesdays for park days and library story time, because being safe does not require being separate. Nicole and I stayed frosty. She completed the caregiver course with her jaw set like stone. She showed up for mediation wearing lip gloss that could cut glass. Over time, her edges softened. Maybe it was the repetition of hearing a neutral third party say the same thing I'd said for months. Dignity is not negotiable. Maybe it was seeing me not fold into bitterness, but bloom in a new space. Maybe it was the trust statements arriving with Clara's name on them, reminding her that my boundaries came with generosity attached. The real turn came in April, when Nicole called me from urgent care with a chest x-ray that looked suspicious. She was scared. She wanted her mother. Instead, she had me. I drove over, sat in the parking lot with her, and hummed the same 2 bars I'd hummed for Ethan when he broke his arm in 3rd grade. "You're safe," I told her. We're going to follow the plan. The plan, call the doctor, take the medicines, rest without catastrophizing, worked. The X-ray cleared. The fear subsided. We marked it on the calendar as the day we remembered the difference between vigilance and panic. 2 weeks later, she brought over a pot of soup and said she wanted to see my new place. She stood in my little kitchen and ran her finger along the windowsill like she was checking for dust and said, "This is nice," like a confession. Then she said, "I'm sorry about Christmas." Not for the first time, but for the first time in a way that touched the thing under the words. "Thank you," I said. "I am too." I do not want to paint us as healed, braided into a fairy tale. Family is messier than that. But I will say this. By the time Clara turned 2, we could sit at the same table without any doors between us. I ate my soup from a chair with a cushion instead of balancing it on a stool. When I coughed, Nicole asked, "Do you want tea?" Like a human being. When she fretted about a virus headline, I sent her an article from my doctor's office instead of a lecture. We built a rhythm that sounded a lot like respect. And before you think that's the whole happy ending, let me remind you, I promised justice, not just peace. There was one more knot to untie, one more truth to lay on the table where everyone could see it. Nicole had used my medical portal. She had scheduled appointments in my name. She had set up a caregiver pickup at a pharmacy, which is a shade of wrong even when it comes from fear. We never spoke of it in the heat of our fights because I didn't want to turn a boundary discussion into a courtroom. But I had kept the printouts, and I had a meeting scheduled with someone who would be very interested in them. He was about to get exactly what he deserved, and I had a front row seat. Don't go anywhere. I walked into the insurer's local field office wearing my church lady blazer, the navy one with the good shoulders, and carrying a manila envelope so thick it could have been a doorstop. The receptionist looked up with the polite wariness of someone who has seen every kind of mess parade through her lobby. "I'm here to see Mr. Dwyer, Special Investigations." Her eyebrows did a tiny hop. People get bashful when they hear investigation. I don't. 35 years in medicine taught me the difference between a mistake and a pattern. What I had in that envelope was a pattern with a neat little bow. Mr. Dwyer came out with a mug that said, "World's okayest bad." Mid-40s, graying at the temples, a face like a reliable mailbox. We shook hands. His grip said, "I'm not here to scare you." Good. We went into a windowless room with a table built to hold heavy truths. He said, "Miss Ellison-Wells, what you sent in your initial report was..." He paused as if picking the right word from a shelf. "Concerning." I said, "That's the polite word. The less polite word is exploitative." He opened it. Out slid my printouts. The 2 suspicious explanation of benefits, screenshots of my chart messages I didn't write, timestamps that put me sending inquiries at 2 in the morning, and a calendar entry for a home safety assessment I never agreed to. On top, I'd clipped a sticky note. Not my handwriting, not my account activity, not my consent. He read with his head slightly cocked, as though the paper might talk if he listened long enough. He said, "You're organized."
I spent my life making doctors look like they invented order, I said. I can arrange a stack of forms like a wedding bouquet if I have to. He smiled, then sobered. The telehealth vendor listed on this caregiver consult is Wellnest Telecare. He tapped the EOB. We've had rumblings, nothing firm, yet. He flipped a page. And this home environment safety assessment. That's strange. It's coded as a billable visit, but there's no clinical note attached, just a checkbox form and a signature. Not mine, I said. I don't sign forms with hearts dotting the I's. I let that sit. He looked up, met my eyes, and nodded. Understood. "What do you want out of this, Miss Ellison Wells?" he asked. "Two things," I said. "Education and accountability. I want my daughter-in-law to learn there's a difference between protecting and controlling. And I want whoever used my medical identity to make a buck to pay it back and stop doing it to anybody else's mother." He steepled his fingers. "We can't promise outcomes," he said, like a man reciting policy in his sleep. "But we can dig." "I know how this goes," I said gently. "I sign an affidavit, you ask for audit logs, you track the logins, you look for a name that keeps popping up where it doesn't belong." A muscle jumped in his cheek. "You really did work in healthcare." "I really did." "Does your office like snickerdoodles? I'll bring a tin if this drags." He slid me some forms. I signed where the little arrows pointed. He took my statements like he was tucking children into bed, carefully, with a blanket smooth across their shoulders. As I stood to leave, he said, "We may need to contact your family." I said, "Start with me, always with me." Outside, the sky had that pale winter blue that looks like it would shatter if you tapped it. I sat in my car, hands on the wheel, and thought about how many women never get this far, how many swallow it because family feels too big to fight. I sent a quick text to my sister, Ruthie. "Meeting went well. Call you later." And then I drove to the pharmacy. The store manager, a man with a name tag that said Nate and an expression that said, "I need 3 of me to do this job," listened while I explained, again, that caregiver pickup should not happen unless I say it does. He clicked into their system, nodded at the note the tech had added after my coffee shop call, and then said, "Miss Ellison Wells, I want to apologize. We follow policy, but sometimes policy lags behind reality. I'll put a hard block that requires a manager override and a phone call to you for any pickup marked caregiver. That way, even if a new tech doesn't read the fine print, it won't go through." "That's what I needed," I said. "Not a fight, a fix." As I left, a woman about my age caught my sleeve. She said, "I heard you about the caregiver block. Can they do that for me too?" I told Nate he had a line forming and handed the woman my little card from the co-op newsletter with my email on it. "We're doing a class next week. Know your portal. Bring a friend." And just when he thought he had me backed into a corner, he forgot who he was dealing with. Stick with me, because you'll want to see how this plays out. Back at the co-op, I hung a flyer on the bulletin board with a robin stamped in the corner and the words, "Protect Yourself Online, Health Edition." 20 people showed up, the room smelling like coffee and orange slices. I walked them through portal basics like I was narrating a cooking show. Easy, step by step, no shame if you spilled a little. We changed passwords. We checked who had proxy access. 3 women discovered their ex-husbands were still listed as emergency contacts. One man found that his adult son had the ability to message his doctor on his behalf. "Take it back," I said, encouraging as a PE teacher. "If he loves you, he'll cheer for your independence." By the end, we had a small mound of revoked forms and a bigger heap of relief. A county councilwoman named Angie slipped in near the end and stood in the back with her arms folded, listening. After she came up with her card, "We're building an elder digital rights initiative," she said. "Would you be willing to consult?" She said consult the way you talk to someone you think might say no out of modesty. I did not. "Yes," I said, "as long as we don't call it a task force. I'm retired. I like naps." 2 days later, Mr. Dwyer called. His voice had a new current in it. "Miss Ellison Wells, we pulled audit logs from Wellnest and from your provider's portal. We see a pattern of access from an IP address that resolves to a local co-working space. Messages were sent at 2 a.m., 1:37 a.m., 4:22 a.m., all logged in as you, but from that IP. And we have a name. Caleb Marsh, a care navigator for Wellnest." Navigator, I repeated, dry as a saltine. That's a nice word for someone who found my boundary and drove right over it.
He hosts elder safety Zooms in your area, Dwyer said. He leverages neighborhood Facebook groups. He offers a free home safety check that ends with a form. Add me as a care proxy so I can handle the technical stuff. We've traced 6 other cases this quarter. Small dollar charges, but they add up. He pitched Nicole in the mom group, I said, hearing it as clearly as if I were back at their kitchen table. He probably said I was high risk and that he could lighten the mental load. The phrases had a shiny quality. You could spot a mile away if you'd ever watched late-night TV's quieter predators. "We'll need to talk to your daughter-in-law," he said. "I'll arrange it," I said, "but you're not to frighten her. She's not innocent, but she's not the architect. She let someone in her head who offered her an easy way to soothe the fear." He made a sound that might have been respect. "You'd be good at my job," he said. "I was good at my job," I said, "and then I got good at protecting myself." I called Ethan. I asked him to bring Nicole to my co-op's little conference room. When they arrived, Nicole looked like she'd rather eat a bucket of nails. I set down water glasses and a plate of lemon cookies because my mother raised me right. Mr. Dwyer arrived with a colleague, a woman named Priya, who had the air of a person who could find a needle in a haystack and invoice the hay. Dwyer introduced himself, said "special investigations" in a voice that was more invitation than threat, and laid out the facts. Audit logs, IP addresses, timestamps, a list of seniors in our county with similar small bill patterns. "We believe Mr. Marsh misrepresented his role," he said. "We believe he pressured caregivers into granting access and billed for services not provided or not medically necessary." Nicole's face did something complicated. Shock, anger, shame, disbelief, and then a tiny flare of relief like a pilot light catching. He said he was part of our plan," she said weakly. "He said every family needs a care navigator now." "What did he ask you to do?" I said, not unkindly. He sent me a link. He told me to log into your portal while we were on the phone. He said he'd walk me through the setup because it would be easier if he just handled it." She swallowed hard. "He used screen share." I clicked where he told me to." "You clicked where he told you to," I repeated. "And you didn't tell me." "I was scared," she whispered, then sharper. "And you were stubborn." "Both can be true," I said. I looked at Dwyer. "So what now?" "Now we ask your permission to include your case in a referral to the State Attorney General's office. We'll also ask your provider to issue a fraud alert on any claims connected to Wellnest and Mr. Marsh. If the AG finds cause, they'll pursue restitution, fines, possibly a consent order barring him from this work." "Will he be arrested?" Ethan asked, voice tiny. "This isn't a perp walk situation," Priya said. "This is spreadsheets and subpoenas, but the end result can be just as satisfying." Nicole looked at me like the tide coming in after a storm. "I didn't know," she said. She stopped. "No, that's not true. I knew it felt wrong. I wanted it to be right because it made things easier. I appreciate the accurate sentence. It's what we build from." Dwyer slid over a release. I signed. Nicole signed as a witness. We scheduled a follow-up. They left with their folders and their careful faces, and we sat in the quiet. I poured Nicole more water, even though she hadn't asked. She stared at the tabletop. "I'm sorry," she said, and for the second time in as many months, I believed her. "I know," I said. "Now we repair." Repair looked like this. Nicole sent an email to my doctor's office revoking any implied permission, in her own words. Ethan added a note to the family group chat. No more pseudo-medical posts without verifying with actual clinicians. I wrote up a short "What We Learned" for the co-op newsletter, names removed, and listed resources, state hotline, insurer, SIU, how to check your portal access, step by step. 2 weeks later, Dwyer called with his voice full of business. "We issued a demand letter to Wellnest. They refunded the charges within the hour. We've terminated the contract. The AG has opened an inquiry. And we obtained emails between Mr. Marsh and local group admins. He paid for placement. That's not illegal by itself, but the way he described his services was misleading at best." "Will he have to face the music?" I asked, not bothering to hide the way my mouth tilted just so. "He'll face a new job search, possibly with fewer adjectives on his resume,"
I thanked him and promised, again, snickerdoodles if he ever found himself on my side of town. Then I called Ruthie and told her the good news while she cheered like Ohio State had won a bowl game. I know this part is hard to hear, but it's important. The truth was about to come out, and it was going to be glorious. Because here's the thing about patterns. Once you see one, you start seeing them everywhere. 2 days after Dwyer's call, the county councilwoman, Angie, asked if I'd join a public forum. Topic: elder rights, digital access, and friendly fraud, harm that starts out looking like help. I put on lipstick that matched my scarf and told a room of 50 people exactly what had happened. I didn't use names. I used verbs: revoked, flagged, documented, reported. At the Q&A, a man in the third row with calluses on his hands said, "My mother is in a similar situation. What if talking to my wife blows up my marriage?" "Then you talk with a mediator in the room," I said. "You bring a third party, and you bring your courage. And if your wife is more worried about being right than about your mother's dignity, you have a different problem than viruses." After the forum, an older woman with a cane approached me. "I was in my garage on Easter," she said, conspiratorial. "They called it a quiet place to rest." I squeezed her hand. "The things we accept when we're tired," I said. "The things they call for our own good." I went home to my cheerful little kitchen and made tea. I was just about to sit when my phone pinged. A text from a number I didn't recognize. "Is this Marion? This is Caleb Marsh. Can we talk?" I set the kettle down carefully. So he had my number. Of course he did. Somewhere through something he'd scraped it. I typed, "Why?" He replied, "To apologize, to explain, to ask you to retract." I laughed out loud, alone in my kitchen, at the audacity of a man who thought he could negotiate with a grandmother who had already learned to keep her own receipts. We did not meet. I forwarded the text to Dwyer and then blocked the number. Priya wrote back with a simple, "Do not engage. You are not obligated to receive his narrative." It felt like someone sliding a shield onto my arm. A week later, another shoe dropped. I was doing my taxes at the co-op's Bring Your Shoebox clinic, where a lovely woman named Patrice translates IRS ease into human language, when she furrowed her brow at my 1099s and said, "Did you know your son claimed a caregiver tax credit for you?" Patrice's voice was gentle but edged with concern. "It says you're unable to perform activities of daily living without assistance for 6 months of the year." I blinked, twice. "No," I said. "I didn't know that." The words sat on the table like a pair of muddy boots. "Someone filled out Form 2441 with your Social Security number. And if it's not true, they'll need to amend." In the simmering stew of my emotions, 2 flavors rose to the top: hurt and resolve. I thanked Patrice, took a copy of the form, and went home to think. Ethan, I knew, would not have meant to cheat, but intent doesn't clean up a mess. If you drive into someone's fence, you get out with your insurance card, not a story about how you didn't see the corner. That evening, I invited Ethan and Nicole to dinner at my place. Meatloaf, his favorite, mashed potatoes, green beans with almonds. Comfort food for a conversation that would not be comfortable. We ate like normal people for 10 minutes. Then I placed the photocopy of the form on the table between the salt and pepper. "Do you want to tell me about this?" I asked. He paled. Nicole's lips parted. She was about to speak, but Ethan raised a hand. "I did it. I asked our tax guy if we could claim anything because you lived with us part of the year. He said if you needed care." He swallowed. "I said I did, because of everything." He stared at the paper like it had betrayed him. I thought it felt like the way to balance it out." "And is it true? Am I unable to dress, feed, or bathe myself without assistance?" "No," he said, voice thin as tissue.
He put his head in his hands. No. I took a bite of meatloaf because this is real life, and old habits don't pause for drama. You're going to amend the return, I said. You are going to pay any penalties. If the IRS calls me, I'll answer honestly, and you are going to sit with why you told a story that made me small. Nicole looked at me, wet-eyed. She said, we can fix it, quickly, like if she said it fast enough, the moment would not call for anything else. Yes, I said, you can fix the paper. The part where you learn to make me smaller, to make your choices look bigger, that takes time. Ethan nodded, shame pulling his shoulders forward. I'm sorry, Mom. I know. And I did.
He was about to get exactly what he deserved, and I had a front row seat. Don't go anywhere. The next morning, I called my lawyer. He didn't cluck or gasp. He just said, we'll draft a letter to their preparer and a statement for your file. And Marian, this is part of the same story. When systems pay for caregiving, people start redefining care to match the dollars. It's as old as taxes. We set up a plan. Ethan would file an amended return within 30 days. If he didn't, my attorney would send a letter to the preparer and copy the IRS. Clear, specific. Consequences that aren't vindictive, just gravitational. Then I called Angie, the councilwoman, and told her about the tax credit twist without names. We need a plain English guide for families, I said. What's allowed, what isn't, how to do it right without turning Nana into a prop. She said, I'll have my staff draft something. And would you review it? Maybe we slap a robin on the front. Over the next week, Ethan did the right thing. He texted me a picture of the amended return. He paid the preparer for the work plus a penalty. He didn't hide behind excuses. Nicole baked me a thank you pie that was a little overcooked around the edges, like our lives. Meanwhile, Mr. Dwyer kept me updated. The AG negotiated a consent order, he said. Wellness pays a fine. Caleb Marsh is barred from serving as a proxy or presenting himself as a care coordinator. The local pages where he paid for placement have banned third-party care advice unless sponsored by a licensed clinic. Paperwork and policy, I said. The soft weapons. The effective ones, he agreed. I brought a tin of snickerdoodles and a handwritten thank you note to the insurer's office. The receptionist beamed like she'd been complimented. I told Mr. Dwyer that if he ever needed a grandmother to testify without sweating, I had a blazer for that. He laughed. We may take you up on that. Life settled. Not into a fairy tale, but into a rhythm. Nicole stopped narrating my hand washing. Ethan texted me photos of Clara making a mess with finger paints. I taught another class. Angie's office published the Senior Digital Rights Guide with my edits. We held a workshop at the library where 10 teenagers helped 10 grandmothers fix their privacy settings, and everyone left a little taller. Then, in May, the HOA president emailed Ethan about the granny suite that never was, attaching a terse note about previous applications and visual encroachment. It included a mention of a fee that had mysteriously gone missing during the aborted process. Nicole forwarded to me with 12 question marks. I scrolled to the bottom and found a familiar name. The contractor who ghosted us? His invoice routed through a little company, MRC Consulting. A quick search turned up an owner, one Caleb R. Marsh. Oh, honey, I whispered to the screen. You really do like a side hustle. I forwarded the email to Dwyer and my attorney with a single line. Is this our Caleb? Dwyer wrote back in under 10 minutes. Same. He CC'd Priya, who CC'd someone at the AG's office, and the digital paper started flying. What rolled out over the next few weeks was not a dramatic takedown. No SWAT teams. Just a series of quiet no-mores. The HOA added a rule requiring contractor licensure verification before any application was logged. The AG extended their consent order to include a prohibition on consulting for or routing invoices through any construction or caregiving adjunct entity without disclosure. The Neighborhood Moms Group added a banner, "No solicitations." All small things, all fences. At our next mediation session, part of the trust conditions I'd set for Clara's fund, Nicole told the mediator she had learned more in 6 months than she had in 6 years of parenting groups. About fear, she said, how it makes liars out of us, how we dress it up in vitamins and policies. She looked at me, how it makes us put people we love in garages. "I accept your apology," I said, the words warm as bread. "I also remember the stool by the door. Both can be true." The mediator nodded like a conductor pleased with a chord finally struck clean. By summer, my co-op newsletter ran a recurring column called The Fence and the Gate. Each month, I wrote about one boundary and one way to let love through. June, I don't give out my social security number to anyone who calls me first. My granddaughter can FaceTime me from Walgreens to ask which sunscreen to buy. July, I won't be isolated under the banner of safety. I will quarantine if my doctor says so, and celebrate the reopening with cake. People wrote letters back, brave and funny and sometimes heartbreaking. We stapled them up with permission on a bulletin board that turned into a small museum of dignity. Toward the end of that summer, Ethan asked if I'd watch Clara for a weekend so he could take Nicole to a bed and breakfast 2 towns over. "We need time," he said, "to remember we like each other." I said yes, because that's what love looks like in a family that's mending. A grandmother who says, "I'll hold the baby while you'll hold each other."
We ate pancakes with too many sprinkles and learned that toddlers can make a crime scene out of blueberries. On Sunday, after nap, I took Clara to the little park behind my building. A woman about my age was pushing a stroller slowly, like it held something fragile while she learned to trust the air again. She looked at me, at Clara, then at the robin pin I keep on my lapel. "I read your column," she said. "It's like someone finally wrote down what my bones knew." "Bones are wiser than the internet," I said. She laughed, then sobered. "Did you ever forgive them for the garage?" I considered the bright slide, the wobbly toddler climbers shaped like turtles, the way late sun makes everything look like a postcard. "I forgave them," I said, "and I built a fence, and I taught them where the gate is. They can come through. They don't get to move it." She nodded, eyes shiny. "That's it," she said. "That's the thing I couldn't name." By fall, I thought the last knot had been untied. Then my phone rang, and a formal voice on the other end said, "This is the State Board of Medicine. We're calling about documentation submitted under your name." My stomach did that elevator drop even though I was standing still. "What documentation?" I asked. The caller read off a file, a capacity evaluation form sent to my doctor's office with a note, "Patient lacks capacity to make independent medical decisions." It had been signed by a care coordinator and CC'd to a lawyer's office I didn't recognize. Only one problem. The date on the form was 3 weeks after we'd shut down Caleb's show. The board investigator paused to let the echo of that sink in. "We believe this was sent as part of a template campaign predating the consent order," she said, "but it lingered in someone's outbox and fired late." In other words, a ghost from the old machine haunting the present. We cleared it, filed a correction, and the board's tone softened. "We appreciate your vigilance," the investigator said. "Your case is improving our response protocols." I thanked her, hung up, and felt that clean, cooling anger again. The kind that doesn't eat you alive. The kind that waters the ground you're standing on. There was one last piece of justice I still wanted. Not because I needed another victory, but because closure sometimes requires a forward-facing thing you can point to when the story starts to feel like something that only happened inside your house. Angie's office scheduled a county proclamation. Elder Digital Rights Day. They asked me to stand near the podium while they read it. They gave me a certificate with my name spelled right, a blessing, and a robin's egg blue folder to keep it in. Reporters came. One asked if I wanted to name and shame. I smiled and said, "No,
I want to educate and build. Shame is a blunt instrument. Education is a scalpel. Somewhere my mother nodded from heaven and Frank rolled his eyes fondly at my metaphors. After, in the hallway, a man in a neat jacket approached me. "I'm Caleb's former supervisor," he said quietly. I wanted to say, I didn't know. He looked like a person who had chosen the comfort of not looking too closely. "No one ever does," I said, "until someone makes them look." He nodded, hands in his pockets, and walked away with a new weight in his gait. I went home and put the certificate in my kitchen and made tea. The kettle whistled, the windows let in a breeze that smelled like leaves remembering their next act. I sat down with a pen and my list because I am a woman who loves a list more than most people love their football teams. I checked boxes. Insurer, resolved. Pharmacy, policy updated. Telehealth vendor, terminated. Consent order, filed. Trust fund, active with conditions, met this year. Dignity, ongoing maintenance. I looked at the last blank line and wrote a new item. Christmas. Because there was one last thing to do. Not revenge, exactly. Restoration with a little flourish. I bought a small artificial tree, old school, the kind with stiff branches that look like they've seen things. I strung it with white lights the size of pearls. I bought tiny wooden ornaments shaped like robins and snowflakes, and one that looked like a tiny medical chart because I enjoy a theme. I rolled up my good blanket, the one I'd hugged in the garage, and tied it with a ribbon. Then I wrote a card to Ethan and Nicole. Last Christmas, we let fear make our choices. This Christmas, let love make them. All host. One rule. The garage is only for the car. I was about to seal the envelope when a text buzzed my phone. It was Mr. Dwyer. No preamble, just a photo of a stamped, official-looking letter with the AG's seal and the words, "Consent order finalized." And a note underneath, "Thought you'd like to see how it ends."
He was right, I did. But as I looked at that letter, I realized my story didn't end with a government seal or a proclamation. Justice had been done, yes, quietly, with forms and signatures and a few hard conversations. The satisfying click wasn't the gavel. It was the sound of my own front door closing behind my family as we came in, together, with no one left on the other side balancing a plate on a stool. He was about to get exactly what he deserved, and I had a front row seat. Don't go anywhere. I carried the little tree up the co-op stairs like a secret. It was the old-fashioned kind with wiry branches that hold onto ornaments the way I hold onto recipes, stubbornly, with a whole lot of history. I set it on my sideboard, plugged in the pearl lights, and stood back. Warm, simple, mine. Then, I sat at my kitchen table with my good pen and wrote our names on 3 wooden robins, Clara in block letters, Ethan in my careful cursive, and Nicole making sure her I got a proper dot, not a cutesy heart. Old habits die hard, but they do die. I tied each one with red twine and placed them in a little dish beside a folded card that said, in my neatest handwriting, "Christmas at Nana's. No masks required, only kindness." Ethan called that night. "Mom, we got your card," he said. "We'll be there." There was a pause. I could hear Clara in the background saying, "Tree, tree," like a tiny woodland foreman. Nicole's voice drifted through, soft, careful. "She says she thanks you for the invitation, for the rule about the garage," he added. I smiled into the phone. "Tell her I meant it in Sharpie." December crept closer the way December does, one chilly morning at a time. Between newsletter deadlines and the co-op cookie exchange, Mayon 2 outdid herself with walnut rugelach that ought to be illegal. I kept getting little reminders that my life had unknotted itself in ways you only notice when you can finally breathe without a hitch. The elevator got stuck one morning, and instead of panic, I felt patient irritation and a determination to bring the building a cupcake to the repairman. I found a scarf Frank had given me the year everyone was into Argyle, and it didn't ache the way it used to. Grief is funny that way. It becomes a quilt you can tuck around your knees when the world runs cold.
Just as I started to believe the biggest storms had passed, the mail slot on my door turned into a percussion instrument again. A thick envelope slid in and landed with a thud. The return address? The HOA from Ethan's neighborhood. There's nothing like an envelope that smells like toner and trouble. I slid it open with the butter knife and read a language I know too well. Procedure, pretending to be fairness. It was a notice of intent to lien for an unpaid architectural review fee connected to the proposed accessory dwelling unit, aka that granny suite that never was. Attached, a consulting invoice from MRC Consulting. Hello, Caleb. A site evaluation report, which looked suspiciously like Nicole's Pinterest board printed out and stapled, and a memo from the HOA president about compliance concerns. I called my lawyer. He made a sound that was half sigh, half chuckle. He do love a letterhead, he said. We drafted a reply together. No improvement was made, no review was completed, no contractual relationship exists between my client and MRC Consulting. Any invoice referencing her as party to payment is false and should be withdrawn. Any lien filed will be met with a quiet title action and a complaint to the state's Consumer Affairs Division. We sent it certified and CC'd the HOA board, the property manager, and, because I enjoy a little righteous theater, the county small claims court clerk. Before lunch, I had another envelope, thin this time. Inside was a handwritten note from one of the HOA board members, a woman named Jen I vaguely remembered from Ethan's block party, the kind who wears a sun visor like a crown and brings a quinoa salad that totally has flavor this time. She wrote, I shouldn't be doing this, but I'm tired. The president pushed this through without a vote after a consultation with MRC. I think we've been taken for a ride. If you're willing to talk, I'll meet you at the coffee shop by the nursery. She'd signed it with a shaky J and a phone number. I called. We met. Jen showed up in athleisure and shame. She said, I thought we were helping families. Hands around her paper cup like she needed its heat. He pitched us on streamlining approvals for elder units, said he'd liaise so you don't have to. We paid him a retainer out of the operating budget because the president said he'd handle it. I didn't ask enough questions. I could have bludgeoned her with should-haves. Instead, I slid a napkin toward her and waited. She swallowed. She said, I want to fix it. Tell me how. I said, sunlight, agenda minutes, public, vendor contracts, public, and every application reviewed in an open meeting. You want to help families? Don't hand them to middlemen with shiny business cards. Hand them a checklist and a human being with a name tag that says, I work for you.
We made a little plan. Jen would ask for a special meeting. I would bring copies of the consent order against Caleb's old company and a brief handout titled, How to Smell a Rat When the Rat Wears a Tie. I went home and formatted the handout in 14-point font with little bullets shaped like robins, because you can fight a rat and still be adorable. And just when he thought he had me backed into a corner, he forgot who he was dealing with. Stick with me, because you'll want to see how this plays out. The special meeting drew more neighbors than any 4th of July picnic they'd ever held. Word travels fast when the words are Leon and Grandma. I sat in the front row in my navy blazer, the one that makes me feel like I can lift a car. The HOA president, a tall man with hair gel you could set your watch by, started with a speech about procedural efficiencies and alignment with best practices. The room rustled with polite outrage. Jen cleared her throat and stood and said, Point of order. We never voted on a retainer. We never approved a lien policy for non-existent projects, and this community is not a candy bowl for consultants. Then it was my turn. I kept it simple. Some of you know me, I said. I'm Marion. I almost built an accessory dwelling unit at my son's home. We didn't. We never got past the first argument. But someone took my name and turned it into a bill, and then into a threat. I held up the consent order like a teacher holds up the good book.
This gentleman, Caleb Marsh, has been barred by the state from acting as a care coordinator. He also ran MRC Consulting. Same initials, same habit of using systems that are supposed to protect families as piggy banks. I did not rant. I did not weep. I put facts on the table like silverware and let everyone see they were clean. A man in the back raised his hand. "My mother lives with us," he said. "We were told we'd need to hire MRC to shepherd our application. We paid a consult fee. He gave us a checklist that was just your guidelines printed off your website." Heads turned. The president's jaw twitched. Someone coughed into their elbow with the specific rhythm of a held-in "I told you so." A motion was made. A vote was taken. The board terminated their contract with MRC on the spot, rescinded the lien policy for anything not voted on in open session, and referred the matter to the county consumer office. The president resigned 2 days later to focus on family. The interim president sent me a thank you email with 3 heart emojis, which I forgave because reform comes dressed in whatever clothes it can find. I didn't gloat. Okay, I gloat adjacent, smiled into my coffee the next morning. Then I got back to work, because once you stop being a person other people can herd, you become a person other people find when they're lost. The co-op put me on a tiny stipend, nothing lavish, to coordinate our digital dignity project. The library asked me to run a monthly clinic. Angie's office sent over a stack of draft pamphlets for my red pen. I kept making my lists. I kept my receipts. A week before Christmas, the library posted its winter events online. Right there between pajama story time and intro to crochet sat Winter Wellness Webinar, Care Planning with CRM Navigators. My skin did that prickle sing it does when a storm's coming. CRM, not MRC. But if you've ever worked a switchboard, you know a rotated acronym when you see one. The description was a word salad of holistic, stress lightening, family forward, with no last names, no licensing numbers, just a registration link and a phone number that pinged back to a cheap VoIP service. I called the librarian who schedules the rooms. "Can you tell me who booked this?" I asked, keeping my tone friendly because librarians are the last line of defense between us and chaos. She said, "A woman named Kelly. She paid the room fee, said it was a community wellness talk." I forwarded her the consent order, highlighted the relevant lines, and kept my voice soft. "I think you've got a wolf in an ugly sweater." She canceled the booking within the hour, bless her, and added a new policy to the library website. Health-related programs must be sponsored by a licensed provider or vetted nonprofit. And she also tucked my number into her Rolodex and asked whether I'd fill the slot with a "don't get scammed by helpers" chat. I said yes, and baked a pan of brownies for the staff room because prevention runs on sugar. Meanwhile, my phone pinged with a text from a new number that I did recognize. Confession. I didn't save Caleb's number, but some numbers etch themselves into your brain like a serial jingle. The text read, "You're relentless. New year, new leaf. Let the past be the past." I set down the phone and laughed. Alone in my kitchen, the good laugh that has kept me a whole human longer than any multivitamin. I did not reply. I screenshotted the message and sent it to Priya with the same caption as before. "Do not engage." She replied with a little shield emoji and, "He's testing fences. Yours worked." My sister Ruthie arrived from Ohio 2 days early with cranberry relish and opinions about travel mugs. We set the table together. I put out the Christmas plates Frank and I had bought at a discount store the year the kids all decided plaid was in. I ironed napkins because I am fancy where it costs nothing. I tucked the 3 wooden robins into the branches. Christmas Eve, Ethan texted, "Running late, Clara found the ribbon and has turned herself into a maypole." Nicole added, "We're bringing a pie. It might be ugly." I thumbs up both and turned on the kettle. They arrived pink-cheeked and winded. Clara toddled in like a parade, chanting, "Tree, cookie, Nana." Nicole held the pie like a fragile apology, which it turned out to be. A pecan that had bubbled over on one side and caramelized the crust into something stubborn and enduring. "It's not pretty," she started, but I cut her off with a fork and a grin. "It's delicious," I said. "We've spent an entire year learning the difference between optics and substance. It was a good place to practice." We sat at my table, 4 chairs, 1 booster, no barriers, no propped doors, no plates crossed like messages on the threshold. I served meatballs and noodles because I like traditions that take a nap in gravy, and because it makes the kitchen smell like a hug you can eat. Midway through dinner, Nicole reached for my hand. "Thank you," she said, simple, naked of spin, "for all of it, for not giving up on us." I squeezed back. "You don't get rid of me that easy." After dishes and pie and a brief interlude where Clara fed her stuffed rabbit 1 green bean at a time, we moved to the little tree. I handed out the ornaments. "These are ours," I said, "for this house and every house after. Ethan, hang yours high so your daughter can't relocate it. Nicole, hang yours wherever you like because we're done with rules that pretend to love us by keeping us apart. Clara, give me yours and I'll help you." She plopped it into my hand with a ta-da that could have powered the grid. We lingered longer than we planned, and when they left, Nicole hugged me in that loose, uncalculated way people do when they stop keeping score. "See you tomorrow," she said, and I believed her. The next afternoon, we had round 2, leftovers and games. Ruthie taught Clara to play restaurant, which is code for, "We will take your order and bring you a wooden carrot." In the quiet after they left, I sat with a cup of chamomile and watched the lights blink, the way little miracles do. On, off, steady, enough. 2 days later, the mail carried another small hinge, a letter from the Attorney General's office. Formal, polite, thanked me for my cooperation. Enclosed was a notice that part of the settlement fine would be directed to County Elder Tech Education. Attached a memorandum acknowledging the contribution of citizen advocate Marion Ellison Wells for identifying and documenting a pattern of digital elder exploitation. I'm not a plaque person, but I did put that memo on the fridge with a magnet shaped like a robin, because sometimes you need to open the door to the cold and see a warm truth. I know this part is hard to hear, but it's important. The truth was about to come out, and it was going to be glorious. Because for all the consent orders and policy updates, there was a final knot in the ribbon, a thing no one but me could untie. The night I ate Christmas dinner in the garage, Ethan had sent me a text after, apologizing, promising, "We'll make it up to you." Nicole had posted the photo of the tree with a caption about keeping our most vulnerable safe and a string of little shield emojis. Friends commented hearts and praise hands, and such a blessing to have family close. Not one person asked if the family was close on the same side of the door. You can forgive people for hurting you and still fix the story they told about you while they did it. I wanted that fix. Not to drag anyone, but to light a path for the women who read those kinds of posts and wonder if they should be grateful for a stool beside the threshold. So I wrote an essay. Not a rant, a clear, clean story about a Christmas behind a door, about fear dressed like virtue, about paperwork used like reins. I left out names and included resources. I submitted it to the local paper under the title, "The Garage Was Warm. That Wasn't the Point." The editor emailed me back within an hour, "Publish next Sunday in the feature section, print and online." She wrote, "It made me call my mom, and it made me check my own impulse to boss her in the name of care."
I told Ethan and Nicole before it ran. I showed them the draft at my kitchen table. Ethan read it with his jaw tight and his thumb pressing a crescent into the paper. Nicole cried by page 2. "It's fair," she said. "It hurts, but it's fair." Ethan nodded, eyes glossy. "We deserve the discomfort," he said, "and other people deserve the example." The piece went live on a frostbright Sunday. The comments were kinder than the internet is famous for. People told their own stories, garages, basements, porches. People told their learnings, fences, gates, 1,000 small apologies tucked into coffee and casseroles. It didn't blow up, and I didn't want it to.
It simmered. It fed people I'll never meet. It changed little rooms, which is how the world becomes larger. 2 days later, my phone pinged with a calendar alert I didn't set. CRM Winter Wellness rescheduled to Community Center Gym. I stared at it, then smiled a smile that felt like lacing up old sneakers. Someone had scraped my email to put me on their invite list. Bless their efficiency. The new flyer had a logo that looked like a caduceus if you squinted in a fog, and a tagline, "We navigate so you can love." Boy, did they know their market. I called the community center director, who is either 27 or immortal. I sent him the consent order. He canceled the event and forwarded the materials to the AG's office. Then he asked if I would fill their now empty slot with a panel called Loving Without Overstepping. I said yes, as long as I could invite the mediator and a local geriatrician who knows how to tell the truth with a gentle voice. He said yes to both and offered to have the youth group set up chairs, which is the sort of sentence that makes me believe in civic life. The night of the panel, I wore my robin pin and the good scarf. The gym smelled like mop water and hope. We answered questions that were more confession than inquiry. One son asked, "How do I know if I'm protecting or policing?" The doctor said, "Ask if the rule fits the infection or the fear. If it fits the fear, call your mother instead." The mediator said, "Write it down when you're calm, not when you're scared." I said, "If you have to walk food through a door to an elder on a holiday and the doctor didn't order isolation, your problem isn't the virus." From the back, between the bleachers, I saw him. Beige jacket, hair that had given up pretending it wasn't receding. A man who'd banked so long on women being tired that he forgot we run on something deeper. He watched, hands in pockets, eyes sliding away when mine found his. He wasn't in violation just by attending. He was in violation by breathing the same air as a community that had his number. He left before the applause, slipping into the cold like a man who only knows exits. "Was that?" the mediator murmured, standing next to me as we stacked chairs. "That was," I said. Let him learn the geography of rooms where his words don't land anymore. A week later, a letter found its way to me through Angie's office. It was from one of the other women who'd been in the first wave of his care navigation, a widow named Paulette, with tight cursive and a loopy sense of humor. She included copies of EOBs, her own logs, a picture of a calendar with boxes around midnight like a string of little tombstones. She wrote, "I didn't know who to tell, and then I read your column and thought, tell the woman with the robin pin." We added her file to the AG's stack. Quiet justice is still justice. Spring edged in. My windows opened a little more each day. Ethan tilled a patch of his backyard so Clara could announce, "I plant," and cover herself in soil like a true American child. Nicole sent photos of dirt under tiny fingernails and captions like, "Turns out mess is not a disease." I put the newsletter to bed one afternoon and realized I'd gone a whole week without talking about Caleb or consent orders. I made a tuna sandwich and ate it with a reverence my mother would have reserved for pot roast. Then the phone rang. The caller ID said, "Clerk of Courts." That sound you hear is my blood pressure doing an interpretive dance. "Miss Ellison Wells, we're calling as victim services to notify you that a show cause hearing has been scheduled. The state believes Mr. Caleb R. Marsh violated the consent order by acting as an unlicensed consultant under another entity. You're listed to testify as to the pattern." The date was 3 weeks away. The location was the county courthouse with the ugly fountain that looks like a melted wedding cake. I hung up and felt exactly two things: relief and resolute. I called Dwyer. I said, "I'll be there." He said, "Wear the blazer." I called Ruthie. She said, "I'm bringing my good pearls." I called Ethan. He said, "Do you want us there?" I said yes. And for the first time in a year, I didn't feel like I was inviting him to pick sides. I was inviting him to witness a season ending. The night before the hearing, I set out my clothes like a teenager with a crush on justice. I put my documents in order, chronology, exhibits, the kind of dividers that make people behave. I slept well. That's a sentence I don't take for granted anymore.
We arrived early. The courthouse smelled the way courthouses smell: paper, cold tile, a little fear. We sat on a hard bench under a painting of a ship braving a storm someone in procurement thought would be inspiring. The bailiff called our case. Caleb sat at the table with a lawyer who looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. He glanced back, saw me, and had the sense to drop his eyes. The judge was a woman with hair like a steel halo and a voice trained to make grown men sit up straight. The AG's attorney laid out the case: new solicitations under CRM, cross-posting in neighborhood groups, 2 events scheduled, one canceled by the library after being alerted, a second in the community gym canceled after verification, couples billed for care plans with put-and-paste forms, a resumed liaison relationship with the HOA under a flipped acronym. It was all so very boring, which is how a lot of harm travels, on the back of the mundane. They called me. I stood, swore in, and told the truth in the crisp sentences my years in medicine taught me. I didn't color outside the lines. I didn't add spice. I said, "He used my identity in the medical portal. He billed without consent. He billed my insurance for consultations I never had. He scared people into thinking we needed him to love the people they already knew how to love." The judge listened without blinking. When I finished, she nodded the way a woman nods when her feet hurt and she's done with foolishness. Caleb's lawyer tried a defense about misunderstanding and evolving frameworks. The judge cut him off with a hand. "Mr. Marsh, you were told in writing and under the auspices of this court to stop. You did not. This is not a framework issue. This is a compliance issue." She ordered penalties, extended the consent order to a bar that touched not just proxy access, but any advisory or consultative services related to elder care in the state, and referred the matter to potential criminal contempt if another violation appeared. Paper, pen, gavel. Not a movie. Better. Outside, the wind had a bite that reminded me winter wasn't done. Ethan put his arm around my shoulder, chivalrous as a boy with a cardboard sword. Nicole stood in front of me, hands fidgeting in her coat pockets like little birds. "I'm proud of you," she said. "I'm proud to know you." I adjusted my scarf and said, "I'm proud to know me too." It felt like the first time I'd said that out loud without apology. We went for pancakes, because you celebrate with syrup when justice tastes like paper. Ruthie ordered extra bacon on the grounds that the court of common sense demands it. We laughed, the kind of laughing you do when your body knows the danger has receded enough to let joy unpack its suitcase. You might think that was the end, and mostly it was, but there was one more ribbon to tie. The county asked me to help design a postcard to mail to every household with a known elder. Your rights, your records, your say. Simple, readable, decorated with a little robin perched on a fence. The back had 5 boxes you could check with a pen. I control my medical portal. My prescriptions are picked up by me or someone I call to approve each time. My taxes are filed with my consent. If someone wants to help, I ask who pays them and what they're licensed to do. I eat at the table on holidays. We mailed it the week before Thanksgiving. On Christmas Eve, a year to the day since the stool by the door, we gathered at my place again. The tree was still small, the lights were still white, the room still mine. I put the old blanket, the garage blanket, over the back of the couch. Not as a memorial, as a reminder that I won't ever have to hold on to it like a lifeline again. We ate, we laughed, we hung the robins. After dessert, I brought out a last little gift, a tiny ceramic garage ornament painted red with a miniature car inside. "For the tree?" Nicole asked, smiling. "For the tree," I said. On the bottom, in small print, I'd written with a gold pen, "For the car only."
He was about to get exactly what he deserved, and I had a front row seat. Don't go anywhere. The second Christmas was quiet in all the right ways. No blinking alerts taped to doors, no lecture disguised as a centerpiece. After they left, I washed pie plates and hummed something old, because peace has a melody, and when you hear it again after a long drought, your whole body leans in to listen. 3 days later, the invitation came in a cream envelope with a state seal that looked like it had been pressed by a stern aunt. You are invited to provide testimony before the Senate Committee on Health and Aging, it read, regarding digital consent, proxy access, and caregiver fraud. I set it next to my kettle and laughed, because if you'd told me a year ago that my little life would end up in a room where men in suits say, "Madam Chair," I'd have asked what you'd been putting in your eggnog.
I called Ruthie. "Pack the good pearls," I said. She whooped. I texted Ethan and Nicole, speaking about all of this at the State House. "You don't have to come, but you're invited." Ethan replied so fast I felt my phone vibrate with his heartbeat. "We'll be there." Nicole sent a thumbs up and a robin emoji, which is how you know healing is real. You acquire each other's symbols. The committee hearing was a Thursday morning, crisp enough to make your breath visible and your nerves honest. The building's marble floors were so shiny I could see my own mouth not trembling. I wore the navy blazer, the robin pin, and shoes that said, "I am here to stand." Inside, an aide led me to a witness table and whispered, 2 minutes for opening remarks, 5 for questions, as if I hadn't survived a year where every conversation was a question. Mrs. Ellison Wells, the chairwoman, began, adjusting glasses that had never slid down her nose in their life. "Thank you for being here." I said, "Thank you for making a chair for me," and meant it. I told them about the garage, clean, clear, without a whiff of blame disguised as poetry. I told them about the portal, the midnight messages, the care navigator who turned fear into invoices. I told them what we changed: hard blocks at pharmacies, consent orders, library policies with spines. Then I said the line that had lived in my ribcage all year, waiting for a room big enough to hold it. Love does not require erasing someone's signature. One senator asked, "Should we ban proxy access outright?" I smiled the smile I keep for young men who think extremes are wisdom. "No," I said. "Families need help. We just need fences. 2-step verification, real-time phone verification to the patient, and no third-party proxies added without a direct voice confirmation. Require names and licenses on every navigation flyer and make it a fine if they lie. And if someone sends a capacity form without a physician exam, treat it like a forged check." A woman at the far end, gray bob sharp as a verdict, leaned forward. "Would you serve on a task force to draft that bill?" she asked. "I will. But we're not calling it a task force. Call it something friendly. Call it the Gate and Fence Group." They laughed, and one of the staffers wrote it down like it wasn't a joke. Sometimes the right joke becomes policy. After the hearing, in the hallway near a vending machine that hadn't met a fresh snack since 1988, Nicole caught my elbow. "I need to tell you something," she said, voice small, like a child with a broken figurine hidden in her pocket. Ethan's hand found her back. "We were going to tell you, but I didn't know when." "What?" I asked, already bracing without knowing for what. "In January," she said, eyes on the cheap carpet. "After the garage, before everything else, I called a lawyer about guardianship. I didn't file, I swear it, but I had a consultation. He said he works with care coordinators. He said it could be fast-tracked with a capacity letter if the doctor signed. He sent over a draft petition with your name on it to review." She swallowed, cheeks shining. "I kept it in my email like a parachute." I stood very still, like a person who has just learned the second wave is bigger than the first. "Why are you telling me now?" I asked, not unkindly. "Because seeing you there today," her face crumpled and smoothed in the same breath, "because I want you to know the whole truth, not just the part that makes me look less guilty. And because the lawyer's email had a signature block. The care coordinator was CC'd." She exhaled. It was Caleb. Something inside me, something old, something that remembered every time a woman had been told she was easier to love when quiet.
stood up straighter. "Do you still have it?" "Yes," she said. "I brought it." She pulled a folder from her tote like a magician produces a dove and slid it to me, palms up. I looked at the email. There it was, in black and bold. A firm called Gage and Cutter Elder Solutions, a retainer agreement drafted and unsigned, boilerplate paragraphs about expedited guardianship pathways, and on the CC line, cmarsh@wellnestco.com. It was dated 3 weeks before the night my dinner met the stool. And just when he thought he had me back into a corner, he forgot who he was dealing with. Stick with me because you'll want to see how this plays out. I forwarded it to Mr. Dwyer before the elevator reached the ground floor. He didn't text back. 10 minutes later, he called, which is Dwyer for fireworks. "This is the connective tissue," he said, voice alive. "We suspected a pipeline, soft entry through Facebook and HOA channels, funnel to consult, on-ramp to guardianship. He just handed us the map." "I didn't hand it to anyone," I said, looking at Nicole, who was looking at her shoes like they owed her money. "My daughter-in-law did. And I want all your conversations to go through me first. Old boundary, new line drawn in permanent ink." "Understood," he said. "I'll loop the AG in. And Marion?" "Yes?"
Thank you. That night, I made soup because that's how women like me hold a line without turning it into a spear. I invited Ethan and Nicole. We sat in my little kitchen with steam on the windows and said the words families are allergic to. "I'm sorry," and "I knew better and still did worse," and "I will not do that again." Then I called Ruthie and told her the truth like people do when shame is finally dying of exposure. She said, in her Ohio voice that can bench press a house, "We're bringing this into the sun, sis. No one's daughters are going to be coaxed into court against their own mother because a man with a PowerPoint told them it was love." The AG moved fast. Faster than I thought governments could without roller skates. Subpoenas went out to Gage and Cutter. They coughed up a stomach full of emails with subject lines that made my molars grind. Friendly referral, high probability case, capacity letter template, insert name, fast track, no physician visit required. There were discount codes for HOA board packages. There were attachments with scripts for talking to reluctant elders. I read one and had to get up and walk twice around my kitchen so I wouldn't throw the phone. The AG's office called and asked if I'd review a few for a public statement, redacting names. I did, one Kleenex at a time. In one, Caleb bragged, "Once we get portal access, the rest is dominoes." In another, a lawyer wrote back, "Capacity evals are the choke point. Can your clinician friends stamp a few?" It had the tone of men at a hardware store discussing how to cut a pipe without getting their shoes dirty. A week later, the committee issued a draft, the Elder Digital Consent and Guardianship Integrity Act. It was exactly what we joked it should be, a fence and a gate, two-factor confirmation to add proxies, direct verbal confirmation to the patient for any caregiver pickup assignment, a ban on capacity forms submitted by non-clinicians, transparency requirements. Any care coordinator touting services must list licensure and any financial relationships, with penalties if they lied. And a judiciary tweak. Probate courts would require an in-person physician evaluation and a mediator review before emergency guardianship. No more faxed forms that moved like ghosts. I cried a little reading it, not because it was perfect, it wasn't, but because it was possible. It was the kind of law that keeps a stool from appearing at a door next December. We went back to the State House for the vote. The public gallery filled with women who look like me and women who will look like me in a decade, all in their good blazers and sensible shoes. Nicole came, her hair pulled back like a promise, and sat between me and Ruthie. When the bill passed out of committee 11-0 with a round of ayes that felt like a choir, the woman with the steel halo hair met my eyes and nodded. Not to me alone, to a room full of women who had brought paper where other people brought excuses. After, in the lobby, I felt a presence before I saw him. Caleb, beige jacket, lawyer, at his elbow. He didn't look at me. He looked at the floor, then at the door.
as if calculating escape routes. He mouth open like he might walk over and script some apology. I turned my body so he got my shoulder and not my face. You do not give a man like that your face anymore. He pivoted, scurried out like a person who'd been told the buffet line was closed. I know this part is hard to hear, but it's important. The truth was about to come out, and it was going to be glorious. Because while the law worked its way toward a floor vote, Mr. Dwyer's office was stitching together a civil case. Not a class action, the numbers were too small and the victims too spread out, but a coordinated set of small claims and consumer complaints designed to hit on the same day like a gentle thunderclap. I didn't file, I'd been refunded, but Paulette did. The HOA dad with the mother-in-law did. 2 women from my library clinic did. We put their names in a spreadsheet. We really do weaponize spreadsheets at this age. We picked a filing date. We called it Operation Quilt. Many small squares making something warm and undeniable. The morning of the filings, I baked snickerdoodles because the troops deserved rations. We caravanned to the courthouse with Ruthie driving like a woman who's seen an Ohio winter and lived to tell about it. In the lobby, I kissed Paulette's cheek and told her she was brave. She said, "I'm angry. Brave is just what anger looks like with lipstick." We filed. We paid. We got our dates. In the afternoon, the AG held a press conference about protecting elder consent and used words like pipeline and exploitation with the steady tone of people who have finally learned to stop whispering. That night, I did a small and petty thing that tasted better than pie. I clicked on Caleb's LinkedIn. He'd updated his headline to Consultant Regulatory Compliance. I took a screenshot, printed it, and slid it into my scrapbook under the tab labeled Ironies. Then I closed my laptop and took a bubble bath, because justice is exhausting.
In the middle of all that, life kept happening, in the practical, beautiful way that keeps you from turning into a cartoon of your own crusade. The co-op had a burst pipe that turned the laundry room into a pond, and we all took turns with towels. May on 2 broke a hip, and we put together a soup schedule with a spreadsheet that could run a small nation. Ethan got a promotion, Nicole's boutique stabilized. Clara learned to say, "because actually," which is powerful language for someone with jam on her face. Spring came, mercy slow, and then all at once, like it always does. The bill passed the legislature with only 2 cranky no votes from men who'd never met a portal but had strong feelings about them. The governor signed it at a folding table in a senior center while someone's grandson ate 3 cookies he wasn't supposed to. They handed me a pen and a certificate and a corsage. I tucked the corsage into my hair and thought of my mother, who would have said, "Get a picture, not for the brag, so you can remember how it felt when the room listened." Summer rolled in with heat and garden tomatoes. I thought that might be the end of the big pieces, and I was content with that. Not everything needs a final boss level. But then the courthouse called again, not victim services this time. The clerk for a probate judge. "Mrs. Ellison Wells," she said, "we're implementing the new guardianship review. Would you be willing to serve as a community observer for the first docket, just to give us feedback on whether the process makes sense to real people?" Real people. My favorite kind. I said yes. They gave me a little lanyard and a seat in the back where pews make you sit up straight because slouching is for cowards. We listened to 5 cases. 2 were clean, clear need, doctor's exam, family aligned. 2 were messy but honest, kids scared and ornery, elders scared and ornery, doctors decent, conclusions reasonable. 1 was a Caleb special by any other name, a nephew with glossy hair and thinner credentials, a capacity letter typed like a Mad Lib, no physician in sight, answers that slithered when the judge pressed. The judge looked over his glasses and said evenly, "Under the new law, I cannot grant this petition without a physician evaluation. We'll set a mediation first. And sir, if you are working with any third-party consultant, disclose that now." The nephew stammered. The judge nodded once, like a metronome for justice, and banged his gavel. Paper, pen, gavel. I never get tired of that sound. At lunch, the judge asked, "How did the process feel from back there?" I said like a seatbelt, a little tight where it should be. He grinned.
2 weeks later, it was time for the first of the small claims hearings. Paulette went first. She wore a floral dress that said, "I am not the one," and carried a folder that could cut glass. Her case was clean. Invoices, EOBs, text messages with late-night timestamps, a canceled library event flyer with CRM in the corner. The magistrate, a man with kind eyes who likely has seen every variety of mess, asked 3 questions and then said, "Judgment for the plaintiff." Paulette turned and winked at me like a woman who's tasted a rare vintage called Consequence. One by one, the squares in our quilt got stitched. $280 here, $540 there, $1,100 where he'd been bold and someone had not known how to say no until now. None of the numbers would buy back a month or a humiliation, but together they made a new math. He couldn't do it quietly anymore. Around that time, I got a letter from Gage & Cutter's managing partner, on good paper, with bad news spun into apologies. He wrote, "We were not aware of Mr. Marsh's specific tactics. My eyes rolled so hard Ruthie could have heard them across state lines. But tucked at the bottom was something worth not throwing in the bin. A check for the county's Elder Tech program and a pledge to fund pro bono guardianship mediations. I will take a reparation in any flavor if it feeds someone other than the people who hurt us." We had one more court date, the contempt hearing. Remember the show cause hearing? This was its grumpy older sibling. Caleb had done just enough under just enough names to cross the line the judge drew. He didn't get cuffs or orange jumpsuits. This isn't an episode of anything. He got probation with teeth, monitored internet use related to elder services, a restitution schedule, and a ban from any advisory role touching seniors in our state for 5 years. He also got community service, not the ironic kind, nobody wants him teaching anyone anything, but the humiliating kind, filing, shredding, scanning at the courthouse clinic where folks get help filling out forms they don't understand. Paperwork is how you do penance in a world where the harm was born on paper. He was about to get exactly what he deserved, and I had a front row seat. Don't grow anywhere.
Here's the part no one puts on a billboard, but everyone deserves to know. Justice didn't fix me. I did. Justice gave me the quiet to do it in. A year after the garage Christmas, I slept through the night without waking at 2 a.m., convinced that an email somewhere was reorganizing my life without me. I could open my portal without bracing. I could listen to Nicole talk about a virus headline without wanting to pack a bag. That's not policy. That's time stitched to love with a stubborn thread. In October, the co-op asked if I'd give the keynote at our little fall fundraiser. Me, a keynote. I baked a lemon pound cake and wrote my notes on index cards like the church ladies taught me. I told the story clean and short because the hour belonged to music and conversation and the silent auction where people bid way too much on a crocheted afghan because they had attached the meaning of the night to its stitches. I ended with this. I used to think protection was a soft blanket. This year, I learned it's a fence you can see through and a gate you can open. It's paperwork filed in your own hand and a seat at your own table. It's your name typed by you. It's a phone call where your doctor hears your voice. It's this. I lifted my robin pin, a reminder that even small birds defend their nests when they have to. If you needed permission to build a fence and invite people in through the gate, here it is. We raised enough to fund 3 more Know Your Portal clinics and 1 fellowship for a grandkid to teach a room full of grandparents how to block, report, and breathe. The fellowship went to a teen named Javi, who has hair like a miracle and patience like a saint. He started his first class by saying, "Raise your hand if you've ever been told you're bad with tech." And every hand rose. Now raise your hand if you taught someone to drive, diapered someone without YouTube, or balanced a checkbook in pencil. He said, "See, you're fine." Thanksgiving was ease. Christmas came with soft snow and fewer shields in the captions. We ate together at my table. After, I pulled out a small gift bag and handed it to Nicole. Inside, a folder. She looked scared for half a second. "Not paperwork," I said, laughing. "Well, good paperwork." A certificate from the county, she'd completed the Caregiver Education Series, and as a part of it, volunteered at 3 clinics helping elders check their proxies. They told me you were kind. You were clear. That's hard. You did it. She cried and hugged me with both arms, the way my mother said hugs should be given if you want to live with yourself later. She whispered, "Thank you for saving us from the worst version of ourselves." I said, "I didn't save you. I saved me. You met me there." We hung the 3 wooden robins again. We added one for Ruthie because no law passes without a sister. We added one for Clara, who can spell her name now and insists on the A being a star. At the bottom of the tree, tucked under the ceramic garage, I placed a folded index card that said in gold pen, "For the car only." It made me laugh, and it made Ethan laugh, and it made Nicole reach for my hand under the table just because. By the time the year turned, people had stopped asking me to tell the story for shock value and started asking me to tell it for instruction. That's how you know you're not a headline anymore. You're a manual. And because every manual needs a last page, I'll leave you with this: the full truth and the clean ending. Yes, I was put in a garage. Yes, I ate my Christmas dinner near a freezer while my family sang inside. Yes, my medical portal was used without my consent. My name was turned into someone else's invoice. Yes, my own son accidentally bent the truth on a tax form, trying to balance the ledger of his fear. Yes, there was a man who made money off the softer parts of women my age and called it help. Yes, I built a fence. Yes, we wrote a law. Yes, my daughter-in-law told me the worst thing she nearly did and then didn't do it. Yes, my son amended a return and a habit. Yes, the man got papered to the teeth and learned the geography of rooms where his words don't land anymore. Yes, the garage is for the car only. Yes, I live in a building where the bulletin board says the fence and the gate, and a teenager named Javi makes grandmothers feel like queens. Yes, I sleep. He was about to get exactly what he deserved, and I had a front row seat. Don't go anywhere. I thought the curtain had fallen. Paper had done its quiet work. Doors were opened and closed in the right directions. The garage had been demoted to its original purpose. My days tilted toward the ordinary. Grocery lists and library runs in Clara's sticky little hands in mine. I put my navy blazer on its hanger like a uniform retired with honor. Then the letter came.
It arrived on a Tuesday, the sort of cool, undecided day where you bring a sweater just in case. Thick paper. A law firm name stamped at the top in a font that looked like it charged by the hour. "Dear Ms. Ellison Wells," it began, "we represent Mr. Caleb R. Marsh. Your statements in the press and at public forums have caused our client significant reputational harm. Unless you issue a retraction within 10 days, we are prepared to pursue all available remedies, including claims sounding in defamation." I read it twice, then put it on the counter and made tea. Chamomile, because if you're going to meet nonsense in your kitchen, you might as well be relaxed. When the kettle sang, I called Ruthie. She said, "Hold, please," and I could hear drawers opening. Her version of lawyering is finding the right highlighter and the right battle hymn. "Do we have anti-slap in your state?" she asked. "We do," I said, "and I have receipts." We finished our call the way we do when life throws one more hoop to jump, with a laugh that sounds like 2 women sharpening scissors. I called my lawyer. He didn't waste adjectives. "Classic intimidation," he said. "We'll reply with a cordial no. Attach the consent order, your affidavit, the insurer's letter, the AG's press release, and a draft anti-slap motion in case they sneeze the wrong way." We drafted. The reply read like a church program, orderly, respectful, and unmoved. My favorite line was one I suggested and he kept. "Truth is not defamatory, documentation is not malice." We attached 26 pages of exhibits. I slid the stack into an envelope with the same satisfaction you get tucking a grandchild under a quilt you made yourself. 2 evenings later, I was stirring soup and listening to The Temptations when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number.
You don't have to keep doing this. We could find a way to coexist. The bubble with the 3 dots pulsed, then appeared, or I could file today. Your choice. It was either Caleb or a ghost of him. Either way, it was the same old song, threats dressed as compromise. I set down the spoon, took a breath, and did what I've learned to do when men try to plant fear in my house like a houseplant. I blocked the number and forwarded the screenshot to my attorney and to Priya with the caption, "Fences holding." She replied with a shield emoji and, "If he files, we file. Sleep." And just when he thought he had me backed into a corner, he forgot who he was dealing with. Stick with me because you'll want to see how this plays out. It took 3 days. I was at the co-op's Bring Your Shoebox morning, helping folks sort bank statements from birthday cards when my lawyer called. "He filed," he said, tone like a weatherman announcing flurries. "No panic, just facts. We'll move to strike under the anti-slap statute. We'll ask for fees. We'll attach the consent order. He picked the wrong grandmother." I sat at the long table with my neighbors, May and Paulette, and a gentleman named Hank who insists on calling me kid, and told them the truth. They set down their pens. "Do we need to bake anything?" May asked, which is code for "do we mobilize?" "Bake because you want to," I said, "but save the sugar for the celebration." The hearing happened in a beige courtroom where justice always looks like last year's paint. The judge, a different one, younger, whose tie clashed with the carpet, asked each side for 5 minutes. Caleb's lawyer used 9 and said elderly in a way that sounded like easily confused. Mine said documentary record and matter of public concern, and sat down with a little nod that said, "Your move." The judge took it under advisement. 2 days later, his order landed in our inboxes like a hymn. Motion granted, case dismissed, fees awarded, and a tidy paragraph about protecting citizens who speak on issues of public safety and consumer protection. We celebrated with pie and paper plates in the co-op lobby because that's where revolutions throw their parties. I brought a Sharpie and wrote on a napkin, "Free speech plus receipts equals cake," and taped it to the bulletin board beside our fence and gate column. It made folks laugh, which is the oxygen of communities that refuse to be afraid. I thought that would be the final turn of the screw, the classy little bow on a box we'd spent a year wrapping. But justice has a sense of humor and a sense of timing. The very next week, I got an email from the conference organizer of a regional Aging Well symposium, the kind of event where keynote speakers say synergy with their whole chest. They'd invited me months ago to do a short session titled "Keep Your Name, Keep Your Voice." The email said, "We are pleased to announce our closing keynote, Caleb Marsh, compliance consultant." Reader, I did not throw the laptop. I forwarded the email to the organizer with one sentence. "Please see attached consent order and court orders." Then I filled a water bottle and took a walk around the block because sometimes self-care is just moving your legs until the urge to yell passes.
By the time I returned, there was a reply. "We were not aware. Thank you." They canceled his talk. They asked if I would expand mine. They offered me his slot. I accepted, not because I wanted the last word, but because I had it, and it needed to be said into microphones where the next woman might be listening. The day of the conference, the ballroom smelled like coffee and name tags. I wore a red scarf, my "do not mistake me" color, and stood at a lectern that had seen its share of vague promises. "I'm not an expert," I began. "I'm a patient and a grandmother who got tired of being managed like inventory." I told the story the way I've learned to tell it, brisk, factual, salted with humor so the truth goes down easy enough to chew. I ended with a slide that said in big, neat letters, "Ask, who pays you? Ask, what are you licensed to do? Ask, can you put that in writing? Ask, can I call my doctor to verify? Remember, love does not require erasing someone's signature. People stood. Not for me, this isn't Broadway, but for themselves, for their mothers, for the reminder that they can ask questions in rooms designed to make them feel grateful and quiet. After, a woman with a lanyard that said hospice chaplain hugged me and whispered, "I wish you'd been at my aunt's kitchen table last year." Another, a nurse, said, "We've needed someone normal to say this out loud." A man in a crisp suit handed me his card and said his company built portals. He wanted to add a verify with patient's voice button on proxy changes. "Good," I said. "Make it default." I know this part is hard to hear, but it's important. The truth was about to come out, and it was going to be glorious. Because for all the speeches and statutes, the real battle still happens at kitchen tables. 2 months after the conference, my phone rang late, 10 o'clock, the hour where bad news knocks. It was a woman named Denise, a friend of Ruthie's. "I read your column," she said. "My brother's pushing me to sign guardianship papers for our mama. He says it's just to make things easier at the doctor. She's forgetful sometimes, but she knows her stories and her recipes. He sent me a packet. It's a lot." Her voice trembled. "I don't want to be the bad daughter." I said, "Being the good daughter doesn't mean signing whatever you're handed. Bring the packet to my co-op tomorrow. We'll make coffee, we'll read it out loud, we'll circle the parts that are government and cross out the parts that are gall." She came. We did. It wasn't a petition, it was a stack of authorizations that gave the brother access to everything from the portal to the P.O. box. We called a mediator, we called her mother's doctor, we followed the fence, and we found the gate. Denise hugged me in the lobby before she left. She said, "I kept thinking I should have seen it sooner." "Shame's a blender," I told her. "The fix is a flashlight." We watched 2 teenagers skate past the front window on scooters and laughed because we had just saved a kitchen table from an unnecessary stool. Life, blessedly, became mostly ordinary again. Ethan started a compost bin that smelled like ambition and banana peels. Nicole discovered the joy of letting Clara choose her own outfits, which means my granddaughter now dresses like a Las Vegas magician on laundry day, and I love it. We ate tacos on Thursdays because I am a firm believer in themed dinners that cost nothing and improve morale. I took on one more project I hadn't planned: designing our county's version of an emergency envelope, a red folder you keep by the fridge that has the right papers in it for the worst day. We called ours the Robin folder. Inside, a 1-page health summary, a list of meds, a list of who to call if things go sideways, a photocopy of the healthcare proxy with the name typed large enough to read without squinting, and a bright yellow card that said, "I speak for myself unless I am unable. Call my proxy if I cannot speak." We passed them out at churches and barbershops and the DMV line where hope goes to nap. People tuck them under magnets like armor. Meanwhile, the anti-slap fee award arrived. My lawyer emailed, "Do you want a check or shall we donate it as discussed?" We'd talked about it the day the judge ruled. I had enough. The program needed more. "Donate," I replied. "Split it between the Elder Tech Education Fund and the library's program screening health speakers." He wrote back, "Done." I printed the email and caped it next to the AG certificate on my fridge so that when I reached for milk, I could see proof that pettiness can be alchemized into public good if you whisk it long enough.
Late summer, we had Grandparents' Day at Clara's preschool. They set out folding chairs the way schools do. Hopeful, wobbly. Miss Jenna asked if anyone wanted to read. I picked a picture book about a little bird who didn't like the new fence by her nest until she learned the gate swung both ways. On the way out, a young mom stopped me. "My husband and we insisted on my mom moving in with us last year when she broke her hip," she said, choking on the memory. "We were smothering her and calling it care. Your piece? It helped." She looked like someone who'd set down a couch she'd been carrying alone. I squeezed her arm and said, "Love doesn't mean putting a pillow over someone's personality. You learned that early. Good for you." In the fall, I took a bus trip with the co-op to a craft fair 2 towns over where everything smelled like cinnamon and wood stain. I bought a handmade sign for above my sink that read, "Ask first." The woodworker, a woman my age with hands like a lifetime of squeezing lemons, asked if that was my family motto. "It is now," I said. She laughed and threw in a little carved robin because she liked my whole deal. It would be tidy to end here, a golden fade-out with pie on the table and a law on the books. But a few weeks later, one last echo of the garage Christmas found me, and I want to tell you about it because it was the truest revenge of all, the kind that looks like restoration with a little flourish. Nicole asked if we could meet at the big park downtown, the one with the duck pond and the gazebo where teenagers think they're invisible. "I have something for you," she said. She carried a box with a ribbon tied like she'd practiced. Inside, a quilt. The colors were soft, blues and creams, and a little thread of red at the edge like a heartbeat. In the center, she'd appliqued a tiny garage. I looked up, eyebrow raised. "Keep reading," she said, grinning. I unfolded the next square, a door opening. The next, a table set for 4. The next, a gate, swinging. Tiny words stitched along the border, our phrases, our hard-won rules, our jokes. Near the corner, in gold threads so small I had to lean in close, "For the car only." "I'm sorry I made your blanket a barricade," she said. "I wanted to make you one that's a bridge." I pressed the quilt to my face like a foolish woman in a Hallmark movie and cried exactly the number of tears required by union rules. "Thank you," I said, "for all of it, for being brave enough to tell the truth about the worst version of yourself." She shrugged and wiped her eyes with her sleeve like the girl I once could have been friends with. She said she had a good teacher, and a stubborn one. That winter, our house, mine and theirs, settled into a new forever rhythm. We went to the same Christmas pageant we'd always gone to, the one with a plastic baby Jesus who looked strangely satisfied with his worldwide fame. We cooked together, we ate together. When someone coughed, we asked questions instead of building rules from our fear. On Christmas Eve, after the dishes, I took a minute by myself in the kitchen, put my hand on the red quilt square that looked like a garage, and whispered, "Thank you for the lesson. Now go back to being a place for wrenches." And because this is my story, and because I promised justice and not just peace, here is the epilogue you deserve, the ways that paper and persistence ripple after the last gavel echo fades. The Gate and Fence Group published a set of best practices that got picked up to clinics 3 counties over. The Portal Company added a "Speak to Patient" button and bragged about it in their brochure, which made me wink at the ceiling because God loves a rebrand that actually helps. The library's vetting policy became a template other towns asked to borrow. Our Robin folder got a shout-out on the local news, sandwiched between a story about a cat rescued from a tree and a report on the mayor's new pothole plan. I have never felt so suburban and so proud. Paulette, remember her, started a Tuesday club for women who wanted to practice saying no without their voices shaking. She called it "No Thank You," and their t-shirts were very polite and very fierce. The HOA elected Jen to a full term as president, and she instituted Ask First Fridays, where homeowners can bring plans and get real answers without consultants wedging themselves into the middle. Hank at the co-op learned to use Face ID and now opens his phone with the solemnity of a magician pulling a rabbit out of a hat. He thinks it's witchcraft, and we let him.
As for Caleb, he didn't disappear into a puff of moral smoke. He did what men like him do. He tried to move 2 counties over and start again under a tamer title. But the consent order follows like a shadow. He reapplied for a speaker gig and got a form letter that used his name and the word regret in the same sentence. He filed his community service hours scanning forms at the courthouse clinic, where women like Paulette walked past him with folders organized in a way that would make him weep if he knew how. Once, I saw him there when I dropped off cookies for the volunteers. He kept his eyes down. I kept my chin up.
We occupied the same air like two people who had finally learned their place in the story. And me, I sleep. I hang my robin pin on the lamp by my bed each night like a little flag on a hill I climbed and decided to keep. I eat at my table. I answer my phone like a person whose name is her own again. I say yes when it's mine to say and no when it isn't, and ask first more times than either. I still carry a pen that writes in blue ink because the older I get, the more I trust things that leave a mark you can't pretend away. If you're sitting at a kitchen table wondering if the stool by the door is love or only the shadow of it, this is me reaching across the wood to take your hand. Build a fence. Learn where the gate swings. Keep your name on your papers and your voice in your portal. When someone tells you the garage is warm, ask who it's warm for. When they bring a letter in a heavy font, bring your receipts and your laughter. When they threaten to silence you, hang a quilt that tells the story so well you don't need to yell. He was about to get exactly what he deserved, and I had a front row seat. Turns out the best seat is your own chair, at your own table, with your own name on the place card. What would you have done in my place?
So another story of my grandmother has end, and be clicking here you will have when more such stories.